Joining me now, our favorite attorney, well, one of our favorite attorneys. We have many of them. Philip Ellison here in Saginaw County. I talked to you a couple months ago about a big Supreme Court case you're working on. This totally separate from that. We're talking about something that many people didn't know in the state of Michigan. The DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, they can actually enter your property without a warrant.
Yes. And the short answer is yes. Now, not necessarily your house or your immediate yard, but if you own some acreage, at least the law as it arguably is today, with the hopes that we're going to change that, will actually means that state officers, not just DNR, but it could be DEQ, it can be other state officers too, can go into the back acres of your property without your permission and without a warrant.
Wow. Because I've interviewed a lot of people that are, they own 50, 60 acres, a horse farm or animal rehab place. And then they say, yeah, the DNR, they just walk on and they start investigating. So they're allowed to do that as of now, I guess, right?
Well, hopefully, there's some changes coming down the pipeline from my office, as well as from some legislation that's come into place that would hopefully change that. But arguably, right now, these state officials, these state officers, can arguably do that um, under something that's called the Open Fields Doctrine, which I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit here today about.
Okay.
But hopefully, the idea is that with some of these changes that are coming down, with some greater protections under the Michigan Constitution and some greater protections the legislature is trying to put into place, that Open Fields Doctrine will hopefully be put to the kind of the dustbin of history here in Michigan.
Okay. And let me ask you, does that include, now we're not talking, obviously, if you have a farm home, them going into your home. We're talking about 50, 60 acres going onto your property to look at cattle or horse, whatever. It's not going into your home.
It's not the home itself. Now, where the line is, where the line between your home and what's called in legal terms the curtilage. The curtilage is kind of this. It's real nebulous in the law. It's real fuzzy. That says a certain distance from your home is protected by constitutional protections under the warrant requirement. Now, meaning you got to get a warrant, got to get permission. Now, where exactly is that line between? Is it 10 feet? Is it 100 feet? Is it 500 feet? The courts haven't really set a clear line. And it's kind of like, I basically tell folks, if it's in your yard where you cut your grass, you're generally protected. Beyond that is when it starts getting real fuzzy real fast.
The average person probably has no idea. Like before we started recording, I told you, so let's say you own 50 acres. I own 50 acres of land. I want to put a fence around it. And I always thought that legally no one can enter that property, but that's not true, right?
That's not true, actually. So that does apply to private citizens. You're 100% right. When it comes to government officers and officials, if it's not in your home or your curtilage, the Open Fields Doctrine arguably gives them what they claim is the right, or at least the lack of prohibition, to go on your property and to do searches. So think of this,
Wow.
commonly comes up like bait piles is where it comes up with DNR. They want to find these bait piles. They're dead set on trying to stop and find people for bait piles. They'll go on to the hunting areas of people's property looking for these without the owner's permission and without a judicial warrant.
And as of now, as of this moment, they legally can do that and it can be acceptable in court.
Well, as it stands right now,
Right
it's
now.
fuzzy. It's fuzzy right now. I think they can't. I think they can, but no court in Michigan has held that under our more protective Michigan Constitution. But
Okay.
hopefully that's going to be changing.
Okay. And now, as you say that, the Michigan House passed bills to curb DNR's warrantless property searches. But it sounds like from talking to you, there's some things that need to be sized up in that legislation.
Well, that legislation I'm excited to see it. Let me just start by saying that I'm glad, for someone like me who's been talking about the Fourth Amendment for years and years and years, it's exciting to see the Michigan legislature take this up. But the biggest problem is, as we've talked about, is there's no penalty if the DNR or the DEQ simply say, we're not going to follow it. Because a right without a remedy, meaning nothing to correct the wrongdoing if they do this wrong, is no right at all. So kind of the analogy I would tell would be is pretend that they made it against the law to go speeding, which they have, but the speeding ticket cost for your ticket is $0. Why do you care if you get a speeding ticket if the ticket fine is only $0?
Yeah, and especially don't get any points on my record.
That's
Sweet
right.
all day long.
That's right.
Um, wow. So the state, it sounds like they need to adjust this or do something to, because without any penalties, what's the deal? What
You can say thou shall not as much as you want, but if there's no penalty for violating that law, what difference does it make if they continue to violate it, no matter what the legislature says?
Yeah, if my 8-year-old, whatever it might be, I tell him not to do something, if there's not a consequence, he'll keep doing it.
I was going to say, even fathers with 8-year-olds know this firsthand, and I think it's even simpler when dealing with government officials and statutes that way.
Exactly. So what is your law firm? You've been working on this despite what are you involved with?
So my office has about a dozen federal lawsuits going right now, where we've sued basically every level of government involving government officials going onto people's property, whether it's their home, their curtilage, their business, wherever, when they've gone there without a warrant. And we're
Okay.
suing to try to reinvigorate the power of the Fourth Amendment and the Michigan constitutional equivalent. And what we've just done, as we've talked, and I know, Dave, you and I've talked a little bit about this, is that we just got a really, really great decision from the Sixth Circuit, which of course encompasses Michigan, in August, that held that now it is beyond debate that if government officials come into your property, meaning the curtilage part of your property,
Okay.
meaning this area around your home, and they're there without a warrant and without your permission, that violates the Fourth Amendment. No more excuses, no more qualified immunity for government officials when they do that.
Would that be, for example, I have a big property and I have a big pool and then I have a basketball court, so that would be the fringe of the property. Or if I have a mini little tiny golf course out in the distance, like the area around my home.
That's correct. So I would the kind of the more simple way to think of it is, if government officials are walking to your backyard and peeking in through your windows, that's no go anymore. That is absolutely unconstitutional, beyond debate at this point.
And
But yet it's amazing to me, is I'm still getting calls from folks today, even today, on a Sunday, believe it or not, got a message saying government officials are coming on property without warrants. It's happening all the time. And that's why I'm hoping to use your platform to kind of educate your viewers that way, but also to say, if you run into this, reach out to a lawyer, talk to somebody. The only way it changes is if somebody says something.
do you have? Can I bring up the website that you have?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to bring it on the screen. No warrant.com. It's simple. What is this website? How can it help people? What does it do?
This is a little informational website that my law firm puts out. It's nowarrant.com. It gives some basic information about the background of the Fourth Amendment, about Michigan constitutional rights. And it also has a way to directly connect to my office if you are somebody that has been searched by government officials. And again, this is all levels, state, federal, or local, who
Okay.
are warrantlessly on your property. That's a constitutional violation. And that's what, hopefully, with lawsuits, that's what changes the law. That's what changes customary practice of government officials. When they know there's a penalty for violating the Constitution, they get hauled into court. And that's what the hope is that with citizens armed with this information, they'll be able to take government officials to court and make them accountable.
So not just DNR, we're talking federal, state, local, and across the country, any agency, governmental agency.
I mean, and think about that first. You think about that for a second. It's your traditional, your FBI and your ICE officers and things like this, but you're also talking about your zoning official, your electrical inspector, the health inspector. These are we've become so used to government interfering with our lives that no one even thinks about these folks anymore, and they just show up and say, respect the rights I have, the inspector, when in fact they have no right to be on your property without a warrant and without your permission.
And I'll ask real quick, and it probably a whole other issue. Have you dealt with drones yet? Like,
Drones are a new major deal that is slipping through the cracks of more traditional Fourth Amendment protections. The
yeah.
Michigan Supreme Court dealt with the case here not too long ago.
Yep.
Didn't give us quite the full answer to the question right now, but that's still a very budgeting area of law, as you can imagine.
Gotcha. So you're talking. So let's say I have whatever in my a building inspector. I'm not home. The city of wherever I live just walks onto my property, starts looking in, literally maybe in my windows and thinking that I built something. Technically, they're not allowed to do that.
They're not allowed to do that. That's the Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures, and warrantless searches are presumptively unreasonable. Now, there's a couple of exceptions the law creates. Just one example of several would be, say, an officer was chasing a felon, like you see on Cops, right? And they
Yeah.
got to run through your backyard chasing someone. They don't need to stop and get a warrant, but they're not searching your yard. Then what they're doing is they're chasing after somebody. The law has a couple of these exceptions, but they're very narrow and they're very specific. And if they don't apply, courts will not allow Fourth Amendment violations to go unanswered.
I don't know if you've been listening, but in the last 2 weeks, the House in Michigan Oversight Committee has been interviewing several people that I interviewed. One was a lady who rehabs ducks and geese, another one dogs, and she said the DNR. There's many good people in the DNR, but she said there's some of them that are like literally just they go on her property looking for a violation, looking for something to happen. Like they may get an anonymous call, but she feels as if they're going out there just trying to find something. And she thought about this, that it was weird, and she know they can go on there without a warrant, but she just thought it was harassment at some point.
Well, but at that point, I mean, there's a real question. I did see that segment. I'm not sitting here right now. I'm not certain that they can go on that property without a warrant.
Hmm.
There's already this presumption that we've kind of been trained as a society sometimes that when you're from the government and they knock on your front door, you got to let them in. And we've kind of gotten used to society. We know that that's not true for cops and law enforcement, right? But that same basic rule also applies to inspectors and DNR officers and DEQ officers, or I mean, DEQ is, of course, now Eagle now, obviously.
Yeah.
But whatever acronym you from whatever acronyms on your badge doesn't means you're still subject to the Fourth Amendment, even if you're holding a clipboard rather than a gun.
And that's important. People need to remember that, because if they don't, it can be then the government or those agencies can just take it even further.
So one of the best ways I can say that you can defend yourself from overzealous government officials is to not let them in through the front door. And if you stop them at the front door, a lot of times the problems that you have later on won't ever come to fruition.
Because if you let them in and they find something or there's a violation, then that's still eligible, right? Because you let them
Then,
in the
then,
door.
then at that point, you've consented to letting them into your property that way. Yeah. So
Okay.
I always tell there's a famous line from a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. It says, any lawyer worth his lick of salt will tell you under no circumstances never to let an agent of the government on your property voluntarily. I believe that, and it's not me, that's the quote. That's a justice on the United States Supreme Court that said that in a court decision.
Wow.
If it's good enough for a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, it's good enough for me.
Yeah. So do you feel with what you're doing in the Michigan House, hopefully they can revise this? Are we headed in the right direction to it seems like we need to wake people up a little bit and show them what rights they have.
I'm very, very pleased to see that there's some attention being drawn on this, both from the House as well as the courts with the court decisions that we've been getting through my office. But I think the more important part here is we can't lose that momentum that's going in that respect, because I still to this day, and I was just saying this a moment ago, even on a Sunday, I'm getting a phone call from a client of mine that says, "Hey, one of a DNR officer cut the locks on my gate and came onto the property. Is that constitutional?" And of course, the answer is I don't think so. But we in order to answer that question, we got to go to court. Let's go to court. And of course,
Wow.
the joke is lawyers always want to go to court, but that's where accountability is had. If you want government officials to respect the Constitution, you got to make them account when the ones screw up when they do.
Well, I think that will get the attention of everyone, because I say the average person would have thought if you have a gate and it's locked, no, of course they can't come on your land. But that's not it's a quasi, we don't know.
We don't know. And the way I read the Constitution of the Michigan Constitution, I think the answer is clearly no. But the only way we're going to get that answer so that it teaches as precedent, not just, the parties that are there, but everyone else, it'll establish precedent going forward so that others will have those protections as
And
well.
these agencies then will not think they are almighty powerful, because most people just say, or they don't say anything, or they do it. Then it needs to become entrenched in the training or in the agencies that you can't just do this.
Well, the first thing I always joke is with government officials is they don't want to get sued. So if they see their colleague at the next agency over or at the next government over that they got sued and they lost, a lot of times that's a real training opportunity, an educational opportunity to say, let's reflect back on what we're doing, improve our operations so that we don't get sued on this as well.
That
And so that precedent is so critically important, but you don't get the precedence unless someone stands up and says, let's go to court and establish this precedent.
Amen. Yeah, I'm going to put it up one more time before I let you go. NoWarrant.com. I'm surprised that URL wasn't taken already. Um, I like it. NoWarrant.com. Anything. Boy, there's a lot of stuff on here. Yeah, what to do, okay, so I'll put that in here as well. If anyone has any questions, they can message you here, but it looks like a lot of research as well. Oh, I see you highlight the DNR in Michigan on here as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, it's and important. Like I said, the important part is this is all levels of government. There's not just the law enforcement that's covered by the Fourth Amendment. It's everyone that's covered by the Fourth Amendment. And I'm not. And I guess I'll just find out by saying is, of course, we shouldn't be using the Fourth Amendment as a shield to hide illegal activities. But in today's world, the reality is with how many federal, state, and local regulations, Dave, I'm guaranteeing you somehow in the last 5 minutes, you and I broke some sort of regulation.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sure in my backyard, there's something out there that they're going to be coming to my house now, but there's something they could get me for. Yeah.
Well, and the reality is that there's no one person can know the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of regulations. And of course, what you need to do is you need to protect yourself because, and I'm going to quote Ronald Reagan here is the 9 scariest words nine famous words. He says, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. And of course, that's the line. Of course, I'm sure I butchered it the wrong way, but the sentiment is there is that you need to protect yourself because the power of the government, when you're facing it yourself, can be an awful scary place that need to be. And if you can keep the government out your front door, the Fourth Amendment is there to put the lock on it for you.
Amen. Okay. I appreciate you joining us. Come back on when you're busy as well. And maybe I'd like to head out to DC when the Supreme Court action goes down. I'll take a trip with you.
All right. Sounds fantastic. We'll leave the light on for you. How's that? So
Very good.